Good morning. Welcome to Saturday. So during the session so far, have you heard anything about mentors? It's starting to sink in that mentors can be a pretty important part of this process, right? So when NIH put out the announcement for the BUILD initiative and the funding that they were going to provide for these demonstration projects around the country, they really emphasized that they wanted innovative approaches for training undergraduates in research. They wanted us to be creative. They wanted us to do new things and show other institutions how it could work. And they're really emphasizing that we disseminate or we share what we're learning through this program. But they made two requirements in that request because the research for years has shown that there are some critical ingredients for research success that everybody knew about already. So all of the BUILD sites in their applications had to propose two things: mentoring and a summer research experience. So, of course, EXITO has those things and so much more, but this is something that crosses all of the BUILD sites, is the importance of mentoring. So here at EXITO, we like to do everything big, right? Most people have maybe 3 or 4 partner institutions. We've got 11, right? Most programs are taking, 25 to 35 students. We get 95, right? So we took the same approach when it came to mentoring. You're not going to get just one mentor. You're going to get 3, right? So we're going to explain why we think that's important and why we've tried to do it this way. But first, let me show you what we're going to... Oops, I did something wrong. Jen will come up and fix my my first mistake. Oh, it was that simple, huh? Okay. Just get the right buttons here. So I want to just talk a little bit about mentoring conceptually, and then introduce our mentoring model, why we have 3 mentors and how that's supposed to work, and then review some of the things that you might do with your mentor, and then we get really practical about what we're learning about mentoring. We have some feedback for you, and then Kay is going to come up and give you the real practical advice about how to be a good mentee and how to work with her as the mentoring coordinator to make sure that your mentoring relationships are going well. So first of all, let me ask you, how many of you know what a mentor is? Yeah. Some? Okay. It's hard for me to tell when hands don't go above the head. Well, how many of you have had a mentor? Okay, great. And how many of you have been a mentor? Right? So you probably do have a good sense of this, right? So I've put some cards around the table. There may not be enough, but I'd like you to take a couple of minutes to think about what, how you would describe a mentor, or are there some terms that describe what a mentor is or what a mentor does? Like, a mentor is like a blank. What are some synonyms for a mentor? If you were trying to describe a mentor to your 7-year-old, what would you say? A mentor is like a blank. So take a few minutes to write down some ideas. Okay, well, I see a lot of people still writing, so it means you must know a lot about mentoring and have several thoughts about what mentoring is and what it's like. So, does anybody want to share? A mentor is like a blank. A spirit guide, okay. Others?
A role model.
A role model, great.
A wilderness guide.
A guide?
Like wilderness, like when you're out in the wild, you have someone who's an expert and they're showing obstacles or things that you can't eat.
Okay, so somebody who helps you stay alive, right? Yeah, okay. Okay.
A coach.
A coach, great. Any others? Advocate, okay. So, a what? Okay, great. So, we're starting to hear that a mentor can do a lot of things or be a lot of things, right? So, actually, I've got a little list, and I want to see how many of these things you might have put down on your sheet or you might have thought about. So, what roles could a mentor play? Did anybody say teacher? Okay, that's a good one. Friend? All right. Counselor? A couple over here. Anybody else? A guide, we heard that. Yeah. Coach, we heard that as well. Advisor? Some folks. A confidant? Okay, good. Some people thought about, the person you're going to talk to, share things. A big brother or big sister? A drill sergeant? No, nobody had that one? A sponsor? Did anybody have a sponsor? We're going to talk a little bit about that. A patron, kind of similar to a sponsor. Anybody? No? Advocate, we heard that one. Consultant? An elder? Yeah, you had. Okay. We heard role model. Companion? Champion. Okay, champion. Okay. Back. All right. So now that you see this list, does it seem like most of those fit? All of those fit? Could it be all of those? All of the above? So in some ways it could. I mean, we could then say, what do all these mean? But it's just to point out that mentoring is a complex role, right? It can be a lot of things, and one of the beauties of mentoring is that it's flexible, right? So it's based on the relationship. So a mentor can get to know you, know what's happening in your life, in your academics, in your journey, and find ways to be helpful or supportive with whatever you're addressing at the time, right? So some mentors are comfortable doing some of these things. Some things they might not be so good at or comfortable doing. So it's important to figure out exactly what your mentor might fulfill in terms of these roles. And actually one of the things we're encouraging is for mentors and mentees to talk about this. Like, okay, what are some of the things that I can get from my mentor? What are you comfortable providing? Where do you think you could have the biggest impact? So, but again, mentoring is a word that we use a lot, but we don't often think about what is it really all about. And as you can see, it can be many things to many people. So I've tried to figure out what is the essential way that makes a mentor different from other relationships. So there's these dimensions to relationships that relationships researchers have come up with: power and permanence, right? As ways of thinking about relationships. And so on the left here you have power. So power can be experience, knowledge, influence, resources, things like that. And some relationships we have are with folks that have more power than us. There's a power differential. And others are more balanced or equal, right? And some are, on the permanence dimension, some relationships we're going to have regardless. They're just social conventions, right? Your relatives. You're always going to have your uncle, right? You're always going to have, well, I mean, and sometimes we formalize those, like with a wedding. And other relationships are voluntary, right? You're only friends as long as you both want to be, or both get something out of the relationship. So it's much more fluid. So most people are familiar with what they call vertical relationships, right? Where there is a differential. Somebody is clearly more of the authority figure, and they're obligated. So you can think about a parent-child when the child is young, or teacher-student, or boss, or worker, right? So we have those kind of vertical authority relationships that we know and understand. We also have a lot of horizontal relationships, right, with peers and partners and friends. So these are kind of when they're at the same status as you, same level and again, it's just because you want to be spending time together. You both have a mutual appreciation for that. Mentoring is kind of a combination of those two. It's a little bit more complicated. It's kind of a hybrid where the idea is that the mentor has some more experience, some more knowledge, has been further down the road than you and can share those things that a guide needs to do. But it's still, in many cases, voluntary, right? Because you know, if it's not working out, you move on or you change it, right? So it's more of a balancing act, right? To have that kind of more mutual relationship, right? So that there's give and take on both sides, but recognizing that the mentor has something to offer in terms of that knowledge and experience. Does that make sense? Okay, so with EXITO, the three mentors that we're talking about, first of all, we thought that, you know, it's hard for a single person to fulfill all of the functions you might need in a mentor as you're going through this 3-year process, right? So we sort of have these different roles for mentors to play and different types of people to do that. So we have peer mentors, and the idea there is that you have a more advanced student who's you know, an upperclassman and maybe been in EXITO or other research type programs who can help you adjust to school, especially, you know, if you're transferring. They know where to get the books, where to, you know, which food stands are the best. They know which courses to take. They know which dorms you want to be in. All of those things based on their own experience, you know, and they kind of hand that down so they can share the student perspective and serve as those role models and guides to how to get the most out of the program, how to navigate things on campus. So then we have career mentors, and the idea is that, you know, sometimes when you have bigger classes, it's hard to get to know faculty members, but it's really important to develop a relationship with a faculty member, right, who can share their advice on how to get the most out of your educational experience and can be an advisor and can give you guidance on, you know, selecting a major or thinking about career options, but can help you in a variety of ways. They might know somebody in the transportation office if you're having trouble, you know, getting your parking pass or things like that. They might know about how things work on campus that can help you figure out any things that you need to address. So there can be very general in terms of the kinds of things you might talk about with the career mentor, the faculty connection. sort of an all-purpose sponsor who is focusing on, again, what you're dealing with, what's important to you, what your goals are. And then the one that NIH was thinking about is the research mentor. So again, this is the person on your research project. When you get placed in a lab or with a research project, this is the person who is responsible for helping you do that work, sort of like a supervisor. And it may be the PI, principal investigator, the primary researcher who wrote the grant, started the project. It could also be other folks on the team, like a postdoc or a graduate student, or they have lab techs and other things like that, positions that are in the lab. But that's the person who's going to work most closely with you and teach you the skills you need to work on the project, and help you understand how things work in the lab or in the project, so that you can do effective work that contributes to the project. So that's the idea behind the 3 mentors. Let me see if I have the timeline. Well, I'll say a little bit more about each one. So the peer mentor, like I said, is an advanced student. Here at PSU, the peer mentors are involved in doing the enrichment workshops every Friday. So they help the instructor to actually, run those sessions. So they are sharing what they've learned plus what's important for the topic that week. And so that's a regular time when you can be in touch with the peer mentor, and then arrange to see them occasionally outside of that session, just to talk about things, how things are going. And again, they're going to share what they've learned being a student and being through projects like this, and can talk about a lot of things. What's happening in your personal life, what's happening in your classes, what's happening, how to balance work and school, things like that. And so they're very, again, student-focused, focused on you, what your goals are, what's going to be supportive to you. And again, it's relationship-focused, meaning they're going to know what's important because they're going to know you, get acquainted, understand what's important to you. And so the career mentor, again, is very similar, except that it's from that faculty perspective. And we're asking those folks to meet with you once a month. So it might be having coffee, it might be visiting their office, it might be meeting at the library or something like that. Or at some of the community colleges, these career mentors are often the faculty that are connected with EXITO and might be doing the enrichment or the gateway course. So you're seeing them in that context as well. And again, they can cover a lot of things, and it's all about supporting you. The research mentor is a little bit different. Again, we don't have a designated role. It's just the person who's going to work most closely with you on the project. And we ask them, to have kind of a check-in or supervision at least weekly. Often it's much more than that because you're working side by side. And again, they're training on the research techniques, and it's that practical, hands-on, real learning the research experience. So the thing to remember is that this is often project-focused, right? You're working on a study, you've got goals, you've got deadlines, you've got things that have to get done. So that relationship can be more project-focused and trying to, get the work done. And it's also more skills-focused, so it's more about teaching you the procedures and the techniques. And it's not necessarily like you have to be best buddies, although that's nice, and a lot of research mentors have the same kind of experience as the student or faculty mentors, and they can also do those other things, helping you think about careers and providing other types of support. So it's not limited to just working on the project. Any questions so far? This all sounds really fun, right? Okay. So in a way, we've covered all of the bases, right, when you think about it. So the research mentor is more like a boss in some cases, in some cases is like a supervisor. The peer mentors are, again, near peers, meaning they're just a couple years ahead in terms of being students. And then the career mentor is sort of like the balancing one. So because NIH thought that mentoring was so important, at the same time they funded the 10 build sites, they also funded this group called the National Research Mentoring Network, NRMN. And those are some mentoring experts from around the country who are supposed to promote more effective research mentoring for students at all levels, undergraduates, graduates, and postdocs. And so they have a website for virtual mentoring, so you can actually register there and develop a profile with your interests, and then you can search for experienced researchers from around the country who are doing similar work. So if you read an article or you have a textbook and you say, I really want to know who this person is and what they're doing and learn something or ask them a question, you could possibly connect for, I think it's a 3 or 4 month mentoring relationship virtually with some of these really experienced researchers from around the country. But another thing that NRMN does is they have developed curriculum for research mentoring. So this is what we use in training our mentors. And so the things we talk about with mentors, they have to have a lot of skills to be effective in this role. And so these are some of the things that we would love to see in all of our mentors. We can't promise that or guarantee that, but we're working on it with our training and our support that we give. So again, these are also things that in a relationship go both ways. So you should think about this as well. Active listening, again, it's really important for them to know you, to get to know you and understand you, what your priorities are. It's important at the beginning of the relationship to align expectations, to talk about goals and plans and how this is all going to work. Building trust. When we talked among the faculty the other day about what's important for these mentoring relationships, that was like the #1 thing that kept coming up, is importance of really building a solid relationship and establishing trust and feeling comfortable sharing and talking about even some really difficult things. Sponsorship skills. So again, the mentors have a lot of connections, right? That's one thing they can offer. They know how to get through graduate school, how to become a faculty member, how to get the research done. So they can promote your professional development, give you ideas about careers, and help you connect with people in your area of interest. So, and be an advocate for you, make introductions, help you get connected with folks in the field that are doing the kind of work you're interested in, things like that. And then again, what we're working on in EXITO is helping you establish your identity as a scientist. I know you did some identity exercises. And also the efficacy. Again, there are going to be some times when you're unsure of yourself. Do I really understand what's going on in my lab or on my project or courses and things like that? And mentors can kind of have your back and support you and say, no, we'll figure out a way for you to be effective here. And again, we work with them on diversity and cultural competence skills. Advancing equity and inclusion, of course, that's a priority for EXITO. Actually talking about and thinking of strategies for addressing the kind of bias that students might encounter in classroom settings or in the lab settings, reducing stereotype threat and things like that. And of course, for the research mentors, being able to teach the technical skills that are important. And the kinds of ethical expectations we have for doing research. Okay. So the timeline on all of this, as you go through the program, is that in the first year we offer the peer mentoring and the career mentoring. So if you're at community college, you'll have the career mentors during that first year, and then you'll have a second one if you transfer to PSU. And again, we were talking the other day about how it's nice to have two, right? The one you got to know at your community college, and then the one here at PSU. And again, the amount of time you spend with the mentor might shift more to the one at PSU, but you can still stay in touch with the one you had originally. If you're at PSU or other four-year institutions, we're hoping that you're matched to a career mentor who would be with you all the way through the program and really get to know you. And then the research mentor that would come next summer when you start working on a research project, when you're placed in the research learning community. So that one will come later. Any questions? Okay. So again, here are some other things that mentors might do. So again, we heard guiding, right? Discussing what you might do, sponsoring, knowing who to recommend to you, who to connect you with, help you make those introductions. Again, being somebody who's actively thinking about how to promote your career, how to, thinking about scholarships you might go for, thinking about summer research opportunities, thinking about an organization you might join, like the American Cancer Society or whatever, if that's your area of interest. So coaching, showing you how to do things like, writing a cover letter if you've never done that before. Give it to your mentor and say, hey, what do you think? Can you edit this for me? Can you give me suggestions? Showing you how to do things. And collaborating, again, especially with the research mentor, actually working together on the research project and supporting. Again, we're hoping that the mentors become somebody that you feel comfortable going to whenever there is some problem solving that you need to do. Difficult situations, whatever it is that you're dealing with. Sometimes you just need somebody to, listen to you and understand what's going on for you and try to help you get through that. So again, just some ideas for what you might do with your mentor. There might be a talk or discussion about academic interests, discussing what you've been doing in class, what you're interested in, what you're seeing in the news, things about, we try to make matches that are aligned, at least in the same major or something like that, if we can. So, they're excited about their work, and hopefully they're excited about your work, and vice versa. So, and talking about majors and courses and things like that. General knowledge and skills, describing what it's like for the work that they're doing, right? And you've been hearing on some of the panels, like, how did I get to be in this position that I have now? What was it like for me? What were the important things I had to learn? Explaining things like how do articles get published, how to submit posters and presentations for conferences. They can do mock interviews with you, things like that, to help prepare you for the life of an academic. They can be like a career counselor and think about where you might go, what you might think about doing as a goal, and think about application materials or those scholarships. If they first hear about a scholarship that you could apply for, and then they can help with the application process. And then this is the other thing we really wanted to emphasize, that they understand and that they know that a lot of these other things are important. It's not just what's happening in the classroom, but again, all of the things that are going on in your life can have an effect on how you're moving through the program. So connecting with campus services and resources, problem solving around a lot of different things that might be, an issue for you or a distraction for you. Discussing the balance between school, work, and family responsibilities. As you've heard from some of these panels, they've been there. They know what it's like to try to do that, and might have some good suggestions. Discussing experience related to your personal background or history. You might be surprised. A lot of faculty are also first-generation students, and they know some of those things about what it's like when you're trying to figure this out on your own, and are more than happy to share about that. Or, again, the kinds of things they had to overcome in their fields to be successful. Talking about fun things. So I have some mentees. One of them this year did she was in a program to do a student-produced play. So she wrote and performed in a play, and I went to opening night, and she was just thrilled. Hey, you came to my play. Like, of course I'm going to see your play. That's cool. And then another mentee is an officer in the PSU Filipino organization, and she was involved in organizing their big annual celebration. And I went to that, and she was really pleased, and I was really pleased because I happened to win the door prize that night. I got a Starbucks card. Anyway, those things. We understand that your whole life is important, and we want to support your involvement in these other activities. So, any questions so far? Okay, so how does this really work? So that I shared with you the idea about why we have these mentors and what they could do and how they could provide support. One thing is that we feel like, beyond training the mentors, beyond making the matches, it's really important to stay in touch with all of you to see how things are actually going, because, as you know, relationships can be tricky, right? And so we want to make sure that you're actually meeting with your mentor and things are going well. And so we have a system, and Kay is going to go into more detail about how to keep track of all of these relationships. When I think about it, we've got 95 students in each cohort. We've got 3 cohorts on 10 campuses with 3 mentors each. That's a huge number of mentoring relationships, right? I haven't even done the math, but it's way up there. And so how do we make sure that all of those are sort of on track? We have an online system that Kay manages that will ask you to do a short log every month to say, with my peer mentor, I saw them 2 times this month, and these are the things we did, and I generally like this person, but I really wish this would change. I saw my career mentor once this month. We talked about X, Y, and Z, and that's going great, and so forth. So we get the mentors and all of you scholars to report on a monthly basis with these logs, and Kay reads all of these, and if there are comments like, there's things that are going really well or need to be fixed, she will follow up. and try to, you know, either give support or give congratulations if it's a great story that you shared. But we just want you to know that we are paying attention. We do want to problem solve and make sure that things are going well, and that also helps us to report out on our mentoring and how it's working. So we've learned some things from this system, which we call EMSN, EXITO Mentoring Support Network, and we've done some focus groups with scholars and mentors to understand what this experience is like, and so we've learned from them the importance of the training, so we of course continue to do that. The importance of getting off to a good start with the introduction, you know, like this mentoring. When we're creating these mentoring relationships, it can be a little bit awkward because you're kind of on a, you know, a blind date. You've been matched, right? It's also important, as you've heard from some of the other panels, to reach out and find your own mentors, and we certainly encourage that too, and that may be more natural. Although, again, it can be a little bit scary to write that cold call email. But we've also heard that the mentors and the scholars appreciate the ongoing support, and that it's really important for the relationship to have a sense of focus or purpose, for you to all understand, like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Why are we meeting? What's the goal? It's not just about doing a little bit of chit-chat, although that's fine too, right? And so we've learned from our model that again, not all 3 mentoring relationships might be highly engaged, but it turns out that most scholars have at least one very strong mentoring relationship. So we give 3 chances to get at least one really good mentoring relationship. We've also heard that there are difficulties with scheduling. And we understand that everybody's really busy, so that can be the biggest issue in these relationships. So we hope you can find the time or make the time and get on a regular schedule to do that. And we've also heard that students actually are getting different benefits from the different types of mentors. So again, that sort of supports our reason for having 3. But they also say it can be a bit challenging to manage 3 mentors, again, because of the scheduling, because you might have forgotten what you said with one and thought it was the other, you know, things like that. But still, most students are making it work well. So this is actually from a year ago. These numbers have gone up, but we just want to give the scope of this. As of last year, we had 33 peer mentors, 128 career mentors, 71 research mentors. And again, from EMSN, we know some of these statistics. Per month, peer mentors are having about 2 hours of contact, career mentors 4, which surprised me. I think that's again, from a lot of the community colleges where you're having multiple roles, right, as a gateway instructor or enrichment and some of the other things in addition to the mentoring. And then the research mentors, 22 hours a month. But again, that makes sense because that's where the placement is 10 hours a week, right? So out of 40 hours in the lab or working on the project, about half that time you're actually working closely with the mentor. We ask a little, 5-point scale, like how well are you getting along? How strong is this relationship? And you can see they're rated highly across all types, especially the research mentors. And the types of things that are reported for each one differ. So with the peer mentors, it is talking more about academic skills like study habits and things like that. And again, campus connections, campus organizations, and resources. And questions about EXITO, like what's coming next? What do I do next year? With the career mentors, it is career advising and talking about personal circumstances. So again, work-life balance and those other things, and academic advising. And then with the research mentors, you're discussing the theory behind the project, they're teaching research skills and training on data analysis and things like that. So it is sort of breaking down the way we expected across the different types of mentors. And this is another way of representing that. From the EMSN, we ask about what topics were discussed or what kind of activities you did each month. And the main point here is just to see that these profiles look different for each type of mentor, but you can see we get coverage on everything across all three. And from the focus groups, we've heard things like this, that again, having multiple mentors provides different perspectives and more access to resources. So a quote is, you have more connections to resources, internships and stuff like that because all the mentors are probably going to know different people in the field. The ideas for how to make the most of having multiple mentors. When it comes to anything, I'll ask my career mentor first, and then if she tells me this is a good question for your research mentor, then she'll help me formulate the question to ask. So again, you can use the career mentor to think about and how to get things done in the lab, or if there's a problem in the lab, you know, the career mentor might be somebody outside who can help you think through solutions. Scholars value the peer mentors for both academic and personal support. My peer mentor really tells me what it's like to be a student, when to study, how to study, what professors to take classes from, what professors to avoid, which TAs. She's like, make sure you look at the TAs for your sessions. It was really great for me to have somebody who was about a year more advanced because I did kind of feel like this isn't always the way it's going to be, but when you're in it, it's just difficult making the transition to PSU. I did have a hard time with some of my classes. I was like, maybe I'm just not able to do this hard science. But then you talk to somebody and they're like, yes, it is hard and it's okay to fail, but you will succeed. So again, some of that moral support that the mentors can provide when you're having some doubts about how things are going. And we recently asked some scholars what advice would they give to other scholars about the mentoring. And this is what we heard. Have open communication with your mentor. Be confident in your abilities. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. This other is, again, from one person. So had a lot of suggestions. Speak up respectfully. Learn to disagree in a productive way. Manage your time more effectively. Let your mentors know what's working and when it's not earlier on. Don't let it snowball into a big issue. Learn how to accept and use constructive criticism. Don't beat yourself up when you make a mistake. Own up to your mistakes. Be resourceful. Find your voice. Ask for help. Be honest with your PI. So, again, we all recognize that EXITO is about introducing you to new things, right? New opportunities. So we don't expect scholars to know everything going into it, right? And so we really work with the mentors, especially the research mentors, to say, think back to when you were first starting out as a researcher and all of the things that you had to learn along the way. So don't make assumptions about what scholars know already. And they expect that it's not always going to work smoothly, that you learn through trial and error. And so they structure this so that you're not going to break anything that's worth, millions of dollars, right? Don't worry about that. You are going to be supported in learning, and mistakes are natural. So just be honest about that, and they are very understanding. So, any questions on what I've covered? Okay, so now we're going to turn it over to Kay, and she's going to give some advice on how to get the most out of your mentoring relationships and how to stay in touch with her as our mentoring coordinator. And after she goes, we'll have a break, and then we'll have a mentoring panel with both mentors and scholars to talk about their experiences and what worked or didn't work for them.
Okay. So I'm going to start with just a quick moment of self-reflection. So I'm going to put you in, I know a lot of you have mentoring experience. So I'm going to ask you for a second to imagine that you are a mentor and you are giving 3 tips that you would give an EXITO scholar on how to get the most out of mentoring. So we've talked a lot about what mentors look for in a student, and so just think a little bit about how you can be the best mentee you can be. I'm just going to give you a minute to sort of self-reflect. So do people have some stuff in mind? So does anybody want to just shout something out?
Ask a lot of questions.
Ask a lot of questions. We heard that over and over again. Does anybody have another one? Be clear about your goals. That's a great one. Anybody else?
Be honest.
Oh, that's a great one. Integrity, honesty. That's great. Anything else?
Know that criticism is nothing for your benefit and your growth.
Oh, that's,
For a personal.
yeah, having a good attitude about criticism in a professional mentoring relationship is really important and actually one of the hardest things. So that's a great thing.
Put in effort that you want them to give you.
Oh, put in the effort you want them to give you. I love that. That's exactly right. It's a reciprocal relationship. You want to give as much in any mentoring relationship as you get. That's great. Anybody else?
Come prepared with questions, so you're not, and with your issues that you are needing help with clearly defined, so that you're not wandering around mentally looking for, searching for goals.
Yeah, come with goals. Come prepared. Take the burden of your mentor away from your mentor of having to come up with what to talk about in that meeting. That's great.
Be gracious. Know that you are allowed to be there, and that you have the opportunity to be there.
Wow, that is beautiful. So be gracious. And show that, demonstrate that. I think that's great. Anything else anybody wants to add?
Our faculty allowed to play.
What was that?
Our faculty allowed to play.
Yes, of course, Tracy.
Keep on with the relationship even when you feel like you don't need it, so that when you do need it, it's there.
Yep. Yeah. Keep on with the relationship, even when it's not needed, so that you actually maintain that relationship over time. And I would add to that, letting the relationship build. It's always a little awkward at first, but stay in the relationship and you'll find that it really does develop over time. Anybody else? That's a great list. So I think we could just move on. So I'm going to show you my list. So this is a pretty straightforward list, but practice the highest standards of professionalism and communication. So think very mindfully about every communication you have with your mentor. Come with questions. That, folks said that. And you heard all of the mentors said that. Did you notice how many of the people on our panels actually talked about that? It's actually interesting to me. Own your path. So this comes back over here, but it's set goals, come to the meeting prepared. I think that's really important. But the first part of that, I say own your path. And by owning it doesn't always mean knowing it. It's okay. We've had students come into the program that had 2 very different interests. And they just own that. They were very clear with their mentor that I'm very interested in environmental science. I'm very interested in being a clinician. And I don't really know which of those 2 domains I'm going to settle on. But they own that path, and that helped their mentor help them explore which of those options they wanted to pursue. And then have a periodic mentoring check-in and reflection. So that has a lot to do with the gratitude, the graciousness. Just once in a while, remember something your mentor said, and then a month or 2 later say, it really... And so a couple months later, just say, remember when we talked about this, that really helped me. That really helps mentors to know that they're actually making some progress. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these things. So in terms of practicing professionalism and communication, what do I mean by that? So always let your mentors know in advance if you will be late for or miss a meeting. I cannot stress this enough. And so ultimately this to me means things like become much more organized, become your most organized version of yourself. If you do not use a calendar app, start using a calendar app. Make sure that you get a reminder when you have the meetings, or even a reminder a day before you have the meeting so that you never ever miss the meeting. If you have to miss a meeting, let them know. If something happens, dramatic, you're in the car and you have a blowout and you miss the meeting, then actually get back to them right away. And so just never ever miss a meeting. Respond in a timely way, same day. This is also a little difficult to get used to. You're very busy, you're in classes all the time, you have family obligations, work obligations. Set a time for yourself when you check your institutional email. And use that email, make sure that you check it a couple times a day so that you always get back to your mentor in the same day. That's actually really, really important. If you're asking for a letter of reference, and I would say this goes for anything, a letter of reference or a poster to be reviewed, get it, give them as much time as you can. Give them advance notice and then give them what they need to be able to provide those things for you. So, for instance, I really appreciate it when a student comes to me if they want a letter of recommendation and they give me, like a little packet. They say, I am going to be applying for this scholarship. This is what the scholarship is about. Here's a couple things that I've accomplished lately that you could include. All that kind of stuff is really great. And then if you give it to them in advance, it's actually okay to give a little reminder. It's great. It's like, oh, you have a month to do this, and then maybe when it gets to be about a week, it's like, oh, so that's actually really good. And start on the err on the side of formal. So just start every start the match with hello, Professor Klein. And then eventually they might say, oh, I prefer to be called, Charles. But just always start very formally. And that goes in emails. We'll talk about emails here in a second. So in a academic setting, you can always say professor. Just call everybody professor. In a place like Oregon Health Science University, or when you're dealing with a researcher, you can, often just say doctor to everybody. So let them tell you when to be informal. Okay. So, in a lot of our trainings with mentors and things like that, we use case studies, and they use those a lot in science as well. So here's a case study. So I'm just going to read it aloud to folks, and then I'm going to ask you guys to reflect on it and sort of observe what you see in the case study. So Jen, a scholar in the EXITO program, has just learned the name of her faculty career mentor. She is excited to schedule the first meeting with her mentor. She reaches out to her career mentor through the following email. So this is the first email. It's to Carlos Crespo. The subject line on the email is meeting. Hi, Carlos Crespo. Thanks so much for being willing to meet me with. I'm so excited to have you as a mentor. I know I can learn a lot about how to be successful from you, so thanks. A bit about me, I am currently a bio major and I'm a sophomore. I love to study a lot of different things and I'm excited to get some help with my future career plans. Can we meet? I'm pretty flexible besides work and school, so just let me know. Sincerely, Jen. So, how effective do you think this email is? And what do you think about in terms of what might be missing? What was that? Yes, there's no title. It doesn't have a professional salutation. Is there anything, what else do people notice?
Yes, there's no contact information, just people.
Yep, no contact information. That's true. There are a lot of grammatical errors. It does look a little bit like she wrote it in a hurry.
You can say when you meet, you can say I'm available these days, something like that.
Yeah, so it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be a lot of back and forth, isn't there? because there's just nothing practical in the email. It lacks practical information or anything, so the person's going to have to write back in the back.
There's too many exclamation points.
Too many exclamation points. I actually have a problem with that because I work on one of my other hats I wear. I work a lot with youth organizations, and I sometimes will send out these emails, and you guys may even get a few where it's just like, "It's so great. How are you doing?" You know, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. But I think this might be a few too many. It does show enthusiasm, but it is a little bit too much.
Maybe sorry sad, but I mean, the whole tone of the email is too familiar. It's too much, going from to a superior.
Yeah, it's too casual, it's too unequal, and especially for a first email to a faculty member. Again, though, I do think it's warm. There's no doubt that this person is excited to meet me. In the back, is there anything else anybody wanted to add? Good. So all of those things I think are spot on, and I think this comes to this. So this is just a first email checklist. So this is just a quick checklist to go through when you do write your first email to your career mentor or any of your mentors. The specific subject line is actually really, really important. And so a lot of times people will get, especially faculty and researchers, they'll have 100 emails. And so anything you can put in the email line that's really specific is going to be incredibly helpful. A professional salutation. So dear professor, dear doctor, especially until they tell you otherwise. And at that point you can use a first name. The first sentence stating a purpose of an email is really good just in case people don't read down the full email. So I tend to sometimes send kind of long emails, and I realize that nobody reads past a certain point. And for scheduling, include multiple options for time and place. So I usually say for a first one, maybe 3 possible times, or just sort of blocks of time, and a couple possible places. Or you can say, I can come to your office, something like that. And also include what to do if none of those things work out. And that could even just be, if none of these times work for you, get back to me. And if I had a professor write me and say, this is the time, I've given them some times, and they say, 10 o'clock on Fridays will work, I actually follow up right away with a calendar invitation. So then they have it on their official calendar. And that's incredibly important. Really get used to trying to use a calendar. If you don't use one now, you just go ahead and actually give it a go. Let's see. Include a short self-introduction. This can be, doesn't have to be more than a couple, just a little tiny bit of context about you. So it doesn't have to be a long introduction. I tend to, when I make a match, I tend to send out an introduction for you. So I will say, Dr. Crespo is a person who studies such and such, and then I'll give an introduction for you. You're a person that's interested in such and such, and then students follow up. But you can include, especially if you don't have any sort of introduction to the person, just including some information about yourself is great. Warm closing with an electronic signature, warm professional closing, I would say. Best, thanks. There's a lot of examples, but I would just use a very professional phrase. I think it's really great. Someone mentioned to have contact information, how you like to be contacted. I think that's really great. If there's nothing worse than if you really want someone to contact you by phone, having to dig through directories to find a phone number. But if it's just through email, the email itself, that signature, then that's usually fine. And the last one is really important. No matter how fast you're going, proofread. Check spelling, check clarity. Have someone else read it if you're a little nervous about the email.
Send a calendar invite. Is there a standard that people are using?
Yeah, so it a little bit depends on your institution. So for Portland State University, we use Google for everything. We use Gmail, and PCC, it sounds like, is the same. So if you have an institutional standard, if you don't, you can actually ask how they prefer to, to keep a calendar, or how they prefer to be contacted. But for us, there's a Google Calendar. You can pull it down, on your email. There's a little set of apps on the side. You click on that, you get calendar, and you can set up a calendar invitation and invite them. And then in the calendar invitation, I'm always very specific. I remind them, because they could have hundreds of students. That might be the first meeting. So I would say, EXITO Scholar Max, and then in the subject I might say, the time, the place, and a little bit about this is our first introductory meeting. I'm looking forward to meeting you, something like that. I would just say thanks. Yeah, I sometimes think it's okay to have an acknowledgement. Depending on, what they'll do is file away in the back of their mind that you got their communication. Because that can be a little bit of a question. Sometimes they'll send you something and it's like, well, wait a minute, did they get it? I never really heard back from them. So I try and not send a lot of extraneous emails, but I will acknowledge emails. Great. Any other questions? So I wanted to just give an example because I think sometimes it's really good to have an example. So one of our scholars, Omar Johnson, said that I could share this. I remember this kind of flying by my desk and I thought, oh, that's a good example. So I had already, in context, I'd already sent an email to him and his new career mentor because he was being rematched because his mentor went on sabbatical. And so he was being rematched with a new mentor, and I just had sent just a tiny, like probably an hour before he sent me this, I'd sent him an introductory email where I said a little bit about both of them and introduced them to each other. And he followed up right away, which is really, really important. So he says, the subject is EXITO mentoring, scheduling a meeting. So he put the program in there. So just in case, even an hour later, Dr. Klein was like, oh, wait a minute, what's this about? He said, Dear Dr. Klein, I'm so excited that you were able to participate in the EXITO program and even more pleased to have you as a career mentor. So, that's extremely warm. Since I am familiar with your research, that's pretty important, right? He familiarized himself with the research. I can draw many similarities between our research interests. So he's already in a research placement. But you could say the same thing, that I'm really interested in your research area. The Shea Lab, that's where he's placed, has allowed me to understand many of the clinical applications of nutrition research, but I have a particular interest in nutritional health as a social issue, and I'm thrilled to have an outlet for my questions regarding career success in such a field. So, that really shows focus. It engages the mentor. He says, oh, there's some things that we share. And I just think but it's also not too long or anything. He kind of gets to the point. So he's conveying kind of a very professional enthusiasm. As for monthly meetings, my current availability is as follows. He gives blocks of time. And then he did, I think, when Dr. Klein mentioned one of these times would work for him, he followed right up with a calendar invitation. And if none of these times are possible, I can certainly be more flexible. That, allows that in case none of these work with Dr. Klein's schedule. And then he says, many thanks, Omar Johnson. So what he could have added, I think, is more of a little bit more of a signature, a little bit of contact information. And speaking of that, we have had students that really use the electronic signature pretty effectively. And this is a really good example I like to show from one of our peer mentors, Samantha Taylor, who actually branded herself and was doing a lot of networking for jobs and graduate school opportunities at the time. So she really branded herself using her signature. Sorry. So she had two different ones that she used depending on the context. And so the one on the left is really one that had to do with her work as an advocate, as a mentor, and as a coordinator for the QRC here at PSU. So, you know, she has this really great thing that really brands her, and she actually has a nice little personal website that, you know, has some of her information. And then the one on the other side is one that she used as a writer. So she was a writer and did a lot of like journalism and things like that. And so she had a kind of cool one that she used to brand herself in that. So she'd use one of those depending on the situation. So coming with questions. So what does that mean? And you actually saw a really good example from Omar. He actually had very quickly familiarized himself with Dr. Klein's research. So how did he go about doing that? Many faculty and researchers have an online bio. Do a little bit in a professional setting, do a little bit of just actually kind of Google them. Look at their website, read their blurb. You don't have to read whole articles that they've done, but just find out a little bit about them so that when you go in, you know, you can basically say, oh, I'm, you know, so interested in that. Scientists love to hear that. And so Dr. Klein has a great little bio. So Google stalk them. Examples of questions, if you're, like I tend to be a little shy in those situations. So I actually, it sounds kind of goofy, but I actually prepare a couple questions ahead of time so that they're in my mind. And so, you know, and also you get better at it. You sort of, people have their go-to questions that they always manage to ask. So you can, you know, come up with just some kind of general questions and then write them down. You can always ask people about, you know, their career path, their academic path. You can always ask them when they first realized that they wanted to, you know, study something. All those things are great. You guys are great with the questions, so just keep up with that. And those are just some really generic examples, but honestly, like I said, I actually think of them ahead of time, even if they're the most simple thing, so that I don't just choke up. Owning your path, setting goals, coming to the meeting prepared. And this comes and gets a little easier over time, but just anything you can do to keep your mentor from having to structure every meeting, but coming with one or two things that you want to work on is actually pretty important. And so, you know, honestly, you'll have your career mentors in the fall, so over the summer, actually give it a little bit of thought. If I, you know, have an hour of a new faculty member's time, you know, the first part of the meeting will maybe be getting to know each other a little bit, but then also if there's something you can work on. And so, you know, a good one to pick that career mentors help with a lot, for example, would be scholarship applications. So you might think over the summer of some scholarship that you're going to be applying for. You know that most of those might be due in January or whenever the timeline is for your institution. So kind of come up with a timeline. And career mentors love timelines. They love it if you come in with a timeline for anything. So, you know, you say you have a timeline for applying for, you know, maybe another summer opportunity or a scholarship. And, you know, you'd like some help with your personal statement. So you can maybe do the personal statement and bring that with you. If you have a resume, bring it with you. You know, things like that give them something to kind of roll up their sleeves and sort of help you with. And that actually helps the relationship, I think, build. That sort of those practical things that you both work on, give them an entry point for really being able to help you. Keep a running list of goals and things that you work on with your mentor and then refer back to it. Remind them at the beginning of the next meeting what you worked on before. So it's like, oh, you know, I got my scholarships applications in. Or, you know, you were, you know, talked a little bit about balancing family, and I went to the, you know, Resource Center for Students with Children, and they gave me these resources. Those kinds of things really help because then they get a sense of, you know, working with you. And then provide updates when you're unable to meet. So there are times when, for instance, we have a lot of faculty, say they're a field biologist. They may disappear, you know, to be in a boat in the North Atlantic or something. And they may be gone for a while. As a mentee, you can actually kind of keep keep a little bit of a timeline for things that you've accomplished and then follow up with them. Sometimes you can actually send them just an email that is just sort of, this is just an email to let you know how I'm progressing on my goals. And they love that. That's a really good practice. So let's see, I'm not sure where we're at in time, but I think this is something that you could actually work on over the summer. Just thinking about your first meeting and sort of think through, this will be a lot easier after your elevator pitches on Sunday because that sort of helps with this, but thinking through a short introduction of yourself, what your current research interests are. It's absolutely okay to say that they may change, or it's okay to say I'm interested in being a neurosurgeon, but I'm also interested in studying Arctic char. It's actually okay to have it be very different things, but sort of think about the things that you're currently interested in, and just sort of think about how you would like to present yourself and introduce yourself to your mentors. And then think about some immediate goals for this year that that your mentor can help you with. And then come to that first meeting, with some things that you'd like some help with. So it could be, I'd like, some help with scholarship applications and looking for summer opportunities. I would like some help networking, and, kind of exploring my field of interest. It can be things like that. So just think through a couple things that they can help you with over the year and come to the first meeting with those. And it can also be, I'm really interested in two very different career fields. How can I go about exploring those fields? Those are great things. And this is just a quick reminder that I always have for myself about owning my path. Be yourself because everybody else is already taken. Just don't forget that it is okay to be your most authentic self in this process. Don't lose yourself thinking that you have to be, professional or what somebody else expects of you. Their job is actually to work with you on your path and help you be, to really maximize your own potential. And Dr. Croft did such a great job of talking about that on our first keynote, about just owning all those aspects of yourself and then engage them and helping you be creative about how to make a career out of the things that are important to you. And then again, the periodic mentoring check-in and reflection. Just try and pepper a little language like this throughout your relationship. Every so often, just talk about the relationship itself. So this sounds really easy. I will say that there are times when any mentoring relationship, this can be actually one of the hardest things to talk about. How things are going if you're having some trouble. Where this has come up the most, I think, is in just, research mentoring, right? Research mentoring can be kind of intense. You're working side by side on these research projects. There can be lots of ups and downs. There can be times when communication is difficult. And so there can be times when just saying what you appreciate is also a good way of also opening the gate to things that you think might, where you are struggling. You can say two positive things and say one less positive thing. And then that is just framed as something that you guys can work on together. An example would be a principal investigator, so the person who's the bigwig. So say you're working with a research mentor, a graduate student side by side, and you have your principal investigator, but it's really that person you need to talk to about something, but they are just, they're very busy and you don't have that much access to them. So when you do get access, you can say, I really appreciate this and this and this about the project. But one thing that I'm a little worried about is you and I haven't had a chance to really talk through what, being a little bit more independent in the lab. So you're kind of framing it in a positive way, but you're also getting to something that might be something that you need to work through together. Now I'm going to talk just really quickly. Tom mentioned that we have a way of keeping track of all these mentoring relationships. And so what it actually looks like, it's a monthly log. So it's really pretty straightforward. It is a way for us to really track what's going on. It's a way for us to answer questions. We read the logs and then we get back to you with questions. And your mentors fill them out and you fill them out, but we don't share them. You don't see what your mentor writes about you. Your mentor doesn't see what you write about them. So we also have it as kind of a little bit of a safe way for you to kind of report back to us how things are going. And so you get your own account, and it's just so straightforward that I think I can, rather than kind of belabor it, I'll just show you what you do. So the first thing is you get an email, and it looks like it's coming directly from me, but it comes from our system. And it tells you all the information that you need to log in. So it reminds you of the website, it gives you your login information. And so the way it comes, they come monthly, and during the academic year mostly. And so you'll get an email that comes from me. It'll have all this login information. And then if you don't go complete the log, I will be perceived as becoming a very nagging person because the system is set up to send you reminders. And then there's the sort of like, oh my goodness, now it's really late reminder. And this will happen every month. But it is really important for, across our project. And actually it's one of the things that we value the most, not just because it lets us know how things are going with everybody, but it also has really helped us with our funder to keep our grant alive and going, because we're able to show the National Institutes of Health that we have a big project, but we're kind of able to know what's going on with it. So it's really important. It takes maybe 3 minutes to fill out. It just looks like a survey. When you follow it, it goes to a web page. We usually put some announcements on the web page. You go in and you'll see, there's there's a one that's due. If you have any that are past due, we tend to leave them open for a little while, and you might see those as well. If you're a PSU student, we more than nag you about this. We actually, at some point, I'll actually call you and ask you to complete your logs. So I apologize in advance. And that's it. It's that straightforward. So I think that's all. Yeah. Do we have any questions?
Hello? Okay. I just want to say that Kay is a tremendous resource. This is her primary role, is to be the mentoring coordinator, and she reads all of these logs. And our response rates are really, really high because, like she said, she's always setting those reminders. It's, I think, over 80% each month for scholars, and we're aiming for 100%, of course. But the other thing is she gets to know the scholars so well because she's reading about what you're doing with your mentors and in your research placement. So if any of us on the team want to know what's happening with a particular scholar, we just ask Kay, right? So she really is a vital connection between all of the scholars and the rest of the program, just like so many other staff. But we really do take this very seriously, and there are some other resources that are available through EMSN that you can click on and get information about the program. So again, it's just another way of staying connected to the program, in addition to the newsletter that you'll get from Jen and the meetings with Carlos and others. But we really appreciate the work of the staff that are interacting with students every day, and we hope that they will become your best friends, right? So we're good.